Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. My guest today is Dr. Martha Hickey, and she is Professor of Obstetrics and Gynaecology at the University of Melbourne and Adjunct Professor of Obstetrics, Gynaecology and Reproductive Sciences at Yale University. She is in active clinical practice with a research expertise in menstrual disorders and menopause. She's a leader in developing national guidelines for menopause management in Australia and New Zealand, and also in developing a new model of care for managing menopausal symptoms after breast cancer. She was the lead author on an article about normalizing menopause in the British Medical Journal, which ruffled a few feathers last summer. So first off, I'm going to just ask you, why do you think that article proved so contentious, especially here in the UK?
Yes, I was a bit surprised because I felt that we were really stating the obvious, that, menopause is a normal event, which it clearly is, for which many women, most women probably are fine, although they may be symptomatic. But a smaller proportion of women have troublesome symptoms, and some of those women even seek treatment for their symptoms. But I think that kind of captures more of the overall experience of women, as I understand it, than a position which suggests that all women have terrible symptoms.
And people got very defensive about it, didn't they? They really didn't like what you were saying.
Well, I think it's quite a fine line to tread to not to frighten women. I'm particularly concerned about younger women facing menopause who may be thinking that they're heading for something catastrophic. So it's a fine line between reassuring those women that they'll probably be fine, and also acknowledging and recognizing that for some women it isn't okay. They do have a difficult experience. But an analogy would be pregnancy. We also, I hope that we've learned now not to suggest to women that their pregnancy is going to be complicated and difficult and catastrophic and require medical intervention. But we know that for a proportion of pregnancies, they do need help.
That's a very good analogy, actually, to link those two. And I often think as well that I've talked on here before as well about the perceptions of the sort of three major hormonal events in a woman's life: puberty, pregnancy and childbirth, and then menopause. And puberty and pregnancy and childbirth, they may be difficult, but the overall narrative is positive. But not so menopause. And I share your concerns. I don't want to be scaring younger women, especially because I know that the more we fear something, the worse it's likely to be.
I think that's a really important point. And, Myra Hunter has done some important work in this area around menopause specifically, showing that if you have negative expectations of menopause, then you're more likely to have a difficult time. So that means that there's the potential for harm by overemphasizing the negative aspects.
I think that's massive. I think it's massive, yeah. And it's, but the British press, they love, well, I suppose the press everywhere, but particularly the British press, they love a negative story. They love to scare people. The clickbait is just, it pushes so much of this. And I think the righteous indignation the British do so well really came to the fore over your article, I thought, because I thought your article was very considered. It put across some very valid points, and I'm going to ask you about one in particular in a moment. But it was such a shame that it's not publicly available. So now people can only see the summary of it. and can't actually read the whole article. So if anybody's listening from the BMJ, please make these kind of articles available, because that means that people, they read a little bit, or they read the article headline that's been written about it, and then they can't go back to the source to check whether what's being said is really true or not.
Yes, that's right. I completely agree. And it would be great if it were widely available, and something I should speak to the journal about, actually, and see whether
Could
that's something
you?
that they could do.
That would be brilliant, actually, because I'm super passionate about people going back to the source and not just believing these really scary headlines. Because when you go back to the source, you often find out that it's just not true. Or in your case, it would be really good to be able to go to the source, to be able to verify that actually what's being said about it in the press isn't true.
So I think the other thing, maybe for people in the UK who are listening, to consider is that this narrative, very negative narrative about menopause and the stories of all the dreadful consequences that there might be of menopause, is pretty much confined to the UK.
It's spreading. I
So
fear it's spreading. I really do.
maybe, I mean, it's certainly concentrated
Yes.
in the UK.
But there are people out there, they're trying to spread the gospel according to the awfulness.
I think we need to find a different way of recognizing that this is something that can be difficult but is normal, and when there's difficulties, they're usually pretty easily treatable. Otherwise, we are creating really a problem for younger women. And I think, in practical terms, what I'm hearing from my GP colleagues in Britain is that women in their early 40s are coming in and requesting HRT because they might have one of the multitude of symptoms that's been ascribed to menopause, like fatigue, for example, brain fog, another thing, and feel that they need to have HRT as well, even though they're not even experiencing menopause yet.
And of course, they're also being told that they need it long term because it's going to protect them against absolutely everything under the sun that is associated with women getting older.
Yeah, well, that would be great if it were true. But unfortunately, we don't have evidence to show that. And many of the claims that are being made about the long-term benefits of HRT have not actually backed up by the evidence.
So, what do you consider to be symptoms of menopause?
Well, I bow to the National Institutes of Health in the US, who had a whole big seminar on this, specifically asking the question, what symptoms does menopause cause? And that was a few years ago now. But the conclusion they came to was that hot flushes, night sweats, and vaginal dryness were symptoms of menopause, and maybe sleep disturbance, probably secondary to the night sweats. Yeah, that was it.
Really? Oh my goodness.
So I think we've learned a lot. That was 2005. I think we've learned a lot since then. So studies that have followed women up, and you have to do that. You can't just go to a whole lot of women and say, how do you feel? Because, everybody feels terrible. You have to actually follow up women as they transition to menopause and look and understand what changes to think what might be due to menopause. So since that time, some studies have shown that a small proportion of women have mood difficulties, so depressed mood, not necessarily anxiety, but depressed mood, and that goes away in most cases. And the women who are at risk of getting depression, which is a much more serious condition, are those who've previously had depression, so previously had major depressive illness, and other women are not at risk.
I think that's the key thing. I write about this in my book, that I think menopause brings to the fore issues that we've had in the past and makes them worse. And that particularly, as you say, with depression, usually there is some sort of history of that if it's going to raise its ugly head around the menopause years.
It's important to know that, isn't it? Because if we were going to, for example, try and prevent depression over the menopause transition, then we've done a study where we try to prevent it in everybody, and other people have done similar studies. But really, what we should be doing is targeting the women at risk and thinking, how can we help them, prevent them getting on well, rather than everybody else, because everybody else isn't at risk.
Yeah, there is no one size fits all, is there?
No, no, and as you say, everybody has a different experience of menopause, and one thing that we did, I mentioned in the BMJ article, was for another project, we looked at all the questionnaires for menopause, all the survey questionnaires that have been developed and validated. And I was interested to see what the questions were like. And there were no positive questions at all in any of the surveys that had been developed. So if you took a survey, there's no opportunity for you to say anything else but bad things.
This is what I am finding out, and the more I dig into this and the more I research it, and the fact that you can prime people by giving them, as you say, only negative questions that they can respond to. I recently, I was asked to comment on a survey about women's experience of menopause and aging. And I went back and I said, there's no room, there's no space to say anything positive. So you're just automatically assuming that it's negative. There's nowhere to go, as you say.
So when people say the research shows this, you can be confident that the research is based on a questionnaire that didn't allow anyone to report something positive. And, it's obviously not necessarily going to be beer and skittles, but there are women who, in qualitative studies, do say, well, I had really heavy periods, they were painful, now they've stopped, I don't have to use contraception. I'm at a phase in my life where I'm more financially stable, for example. So it, like all of these transitional experiences, they usually are pros and cons.
Mm. And in your article, you wrote about the experience of women in other cultures. So what have you learned about other cultures, and what can you share with listeners about that?
I think I've learned that there is no cookie cutter menopause. So looking at women in different parts of the world, and also women from different races and ethnicities living in the same country, they have quite different experiences, and there isn't really a common experience at all, apart from the period stopping. And that's quite significant around the discussions around HRT, for example, because the study, when people say HRT is effective, what it's effective for are hot flushes and night sweats. Now, if that isn't your main problem, if your problem is muscle joint or muscle joint aches, as it is for quite a lot, say Southeast Asian women, then we don't know whether or not it works.
So what are the different experiences around the world?
I think there are two sort of axes of difference. One is around severity. So, for example, some women in Australia, where I live, Australian Indigenous women don't really see the menopause as an issue, don't tend to report symptoms, they don't see it as being a negative thing. As they get older, they rise in status in their society. So it's not for them something that they would seek help with, medical help with generally. So there's that scale of severity. Whereas, for example, with some African American women get quite severe hot flushes and night sweats, so a more severe end. And then there's this sort of access of just having completely different experiences, different symptoms. Some women, as I say, get muscle and joint pains. Others get hot flushes. It varies so much around the world that you couldn't really say, there's a common experience that women have.
And that to me points to the local environment in which they're living and how they live and what they eat and what they feel and what the culture tells them about aging and their role as an infertile woman. It's not just about the hormonal changes, is it?
No, that's right. And the issue of fertility is quite important in some societies. I was talking to a woman, Arabic-speaking woman, where I work, and she said that in her local dialect, menopause meant death.
Really? Wow.
So there's a lot in societies where women's value is predicated on their ability to reproduce. Then it's not surprising that not being able to reproduce physically, that being marked by something, leads to their lowering of their status and to what we call symptoms.
But I've also read that in Islamic cultures where women are hidden away when they are fertile, that once they are no longer fertile, they actually have more freedom and they actually have a bit more status as well, because they don't need to be hidden away. They're no longer a danger to men who shouldn't be interested in them, and that actually, therefore, they tend to look forward to that time. So it's really interesting, isn't it? And that can be such a localized culture thing, I'm guessing, as well, as to how a small local culture will perceive it relative to somebody next door, for example.
Yes, so just going back to the analogy again with pregnancy, there's a huge diversity of experience, and nobody's right or wrong. It's just different.
What is some of the misinformation about menopause that you'd like to correct?
I think one thing would be that misinformation that most women have severe symptoms. That's simply not true. We don't really know the proportion of women that have severe symptoms, partly because there's such a variation between women. But at the most I've ever seen reported is 25%.
Yeah, me too.
So most women, that's not the experience for most women. And I suppose just going back to the next most important thing, I think, is about mental health. Because, a lot of women have mental health difficulties through their lives. And I think there's a fear that menopause is going to, cause severe mood swings or depressive symptoms, or even bring on depression. And again, that's not the case. I mean, there's a big study that we did of mood over the menopause transition in over 14,000 women. We showed that about 10% of women developed symptoms of depression, and about 10% felt better, and the rest were about the same.
That's very interesting. And I always think there's so much going on in midlife, isn't there, to cause difficulties with our emotions. And when I was writing my book, I learned about the U curve of happiness, that actually 47 is the unhappiest age. Just because it's the unhappiest age, it's the middle of life. So there's that as well, sort of in the mix. And then there's empty nest and ageism and menopause, obviously, and just all of the other difficulties that seem to land in midlife, I think. So I often feel like the menopause is, I'm the great defender of menopause because it gets a bad rap. It gets blamed for everything, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that's been particularly difficult recently in the UK. And one of the things, sorry, I think I'm sitting in the dark. One of the things that women ask about a lot is, how do I know whether this is due to menopause or due to something else? It's a really important question. So actually being clear about what menopause does and doesn't do is really important, I think.
Mm, mm. So how can we do that? How can we
Well,
get clearer?
I think as I said, the National Institute of Health did it in 2005. They were very clear. We need to do it again, because since then we've got new information.
Yeah.
So I would really like that to be an outcome of, I think it'd be a really positive outcome of all of this discussion about menopause, would be to say, okay, so what does menopause cause?
Mm. Yeah, it needs to be reevaluated, doesn't it?
And also the scale of things. So, as I said, so if 10% of women experience more depressive symptoms, is that a symptom? And if it's 10%, or what threshold does it need to be before we count it? I think these are kind of discussions that we need to have. And the corollary of that discussion is, what symptoms is HRT going to help me with? Because that's the go-to treatment in the UK at the moment. And of course, if symptoms are not due to menopause, then they're not going to be treated by HRT.
I think there certainly is a feeling that HRT is the panacea. It's the magic pill. It's just going to fix everything. And sometimes I think that there's probably a bit of a placebo effect, because women get so excited about it now. The narrative is out there, you'll have HRT and you'll feel amazing. And that, then maybe you will or maybe you won't. But if you do, then you're going to attribute it to HRT, whether or not it's actually HRT that has, caused you to feel amazing. It's
And look, that would be fine if it were harmless,
yes.
but it's not.
So tell us about why it's not harmless.
Well, two things. One is that it's a really good treatment for hot flushes and sweats. That's really what it's been shown to do. And the second thing is that we've got lots of research about it. So it's one of the most well-researched medications that we use, compared to other things that you might get from your doctor or buy over the counter. So that's really powerful. And it means that risks and benefits are well described. So the biggest study was more than 20,000 women, a randomized controlled trial of HRT versus placebo. And that conducted in the US and finished up about 20 years ago now, so it's quite a long time. And it's given very clear evidence really as to what the risks are and what the benefits are. Benefits in terms of health benefits rather than symptom benefits. And one of the risks, of course, is breast cancer. It seems that risk is either mainly or only in women who take the combined HRT preparations. So those that have estrogen and a progesterone. The estrogen alone preparations don't seem to have that risk, which is great, but you have to have had a hysterectomy before you can use that. So it's not available or appropriate for most women. And there are other risks such as blood clots, which can be minimized or even removed by using patches, and other risks in older women around heart disease and stroke. But these are clear. It's not controversial whether or not HRT increases the risk of breast cancer.
And I guess, though, that all of the research needs updating, doesn't it? Because the formulations have changed and the way we live our lives has changed. So the whole mix has changed, doesn't it?
Well, I think, unfortunately, one of the responses to studies that don't show what people hope that they'd show is asking to do the studies over again with a slightly different formulation, which of course will itself be out of date by the time the study ends, because it takes 20 years to do it. So that could be just an endless cycle of very, very expensive research, which isn't going to deliver a result for decades. There are no shortcuts, unfortunately. These are not common side effects, they're very rare. So it takes a lot of people in a study and a long time to show those.
I think that's really, really important, actually, because so many people, well, not so many people, there are people out there now saying categorically that HRT can help with this and HRT can help with that, and it's a preventative medicine for this, that, and the other. But actually, and that it's safe. That's the issue. People are saying it is safe, but we don't know, and we won't know, as you say, for decades, because we don't know the long-term impact. I mean, I'm always talking about how, I'm the pill generation. I went on it as soon as I could, without my mum finding out. And, maybe that impacted my diagnosis of early menopause. I just don't know. We don't know. There are so many things that we don't know. And it needs to be a long-term experience before we can categorically say, yes, this is safe.
Yeah, I'm concerned that there are newer formulations of HRT that are available now that people are claiming that they're safe when we actually don't have the evidence to support that.
Yeah, it's a very sort of contentious area, isn't it, really? So where do you stand on HRT for women who have had breast cancer?
No.
At all, under any circumstances?
Oh, look, occasionally. So there was a systematic review published about a year ago on HRT after breast cancer, looking at the risk of recurrence, and it clearly showed an increased risk of recurrence. In my practice, I see a lot of women with young women who've had breast cancer. Some of those have had estrogen receptor negative breast cancer, and sometimes they've had bilateral mastectomies because they carry BRCA or BRCA1 genes. So in those circumstances, and if nothing else helped their symptoms, then I talk with the woman and the oncologist, and occasionally that seems like the best idea. But I think the other thing to consider is that we've got, a growing number of effective non-hormonal treatments, some drug treatments and some drug-free treatments. So it's not as if it's HRT or nothing. That's not the circumstance.
Because I know, I mean, we talked, didn't we, about how younger women are being scared, but the women who have had breast cancer and are then struggling in menopause, and also they're super scared because they're being told now in the UK that if they don't take HRT, they will be at risk of Alzheimer's and heart disease and osteoporosis and depression and even early death.
Is that actually true?
That's the narrative that's out there. Is the narrative that is out there, and there are women have contacted me on social media and said, what do I do if I've had breast cancer and I've been told not to take HRT? Am I going to get heart disease, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, diabetes? I think is another one.
I think it's really irresponsible to put women who've had breast cancer in that situation, because they've got, they can't make the right choice because there's risks either way. The issue for those women really is about symptoms, about managing their symptoms. And as I said, there are other ways of doing that don't involve taking HRT. And if it were the case, I mean, HRT has not been proven, say, for example, to prevent dementia. It absolutely has not been proven to prevent dementia in any population, certainly not in women with cancer. So if you've had chemotherapy for your cancer that some younger women would have had for breast cancer, then that itself can affect your bones and your heart and has other potential long-term consequences. But there's certainly nothing to say that taking HRT is then going to mitigate that. All that we know is that taking HRT seems to increase the risk of you having a recurrent breast cancer or a new breast cancer.
And how is menopause viewed differently? So, for example, in Europe and in Australia?
Well, Europe's very diverse, as you know, and I'm in the Netherlands at the moment working on a few projects around menopause here, and uptake of HRT is very low in the Netherlands, and I think I was in Denmark before that. It's also the same there, so it's quite variable. I think there's a big sort of social thing about what you read in the papers and what your friends are taking and what you're hearing about. All of us could do with taking something that's going to make us look 10 years younger and feel fabulous. So, if that's what you're hearing, that is going to push up the use quite a lot. And I think just something else just to flag about HRT, which I think doesn't really get discussed adequately, is that when you stop it, you've got at least a 50% chance of getting recurrent symptoms. And those symptoms are to do with stopping. They're triggered by stopping. So I have women in my clinical practice who come and see me and say, I feel terrible and to take it, but am I just putting it off? And it's possible the answer to that is yes. So when I prescribe HRT, which I do, I always have a discussion about stopping and what might happen when you stop.
It was very interesting for me because I went on HRT. I was told to go on it because of my early menopause diagnosis, but I always planned and was advised to come off at average menopause age of 51. And I did that. And I had put in place all sorts of things from a dietary perspective and a lifestyle perspective to help me transition off the HRT. But what was very interesting to me was that as soon as I had an alcoholic drink or some chocolate, I had a hot flush when I came off the HRT. So I was like my own guinea pig. It was fascinating to me. And that settled down pretty quickly. But that was my body immediately having this reaction to two substances without HRT to dampen that down.
Well, it's lucky in a way that you could identify those triggers and they were modifiable triggers for you. So that's a bonus, really.
Yeah. So I know also that you're passionate about changing the way that older women are viewed in the world. And a couple of years ago, I think you did a really fabulous exhibition. You were involved in an exhibition called Flesh After 50. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that and why you wanted to do it and what it was all about?
Yeah. So it was last year, actually, and 2021, and it came out of my clinical experience one particular day when I saw a woman who was facing early menopause, I think because of cancer treatment, I had a medical student with me and the patient was there and somebody else was there. And I said, this is what's like to happen, from your treatment. And she said, oh, menopause, is that going to make me an old woman? And everybody in the room gasped with horror. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. We really cannot have this, catastrophe of aging hanging over women. I was able to get some funding for an art exhibition, of which the theme was aging in women. And we commissioned 10 artists and had an exhibition that 7,000 people came to. And one of the big pieces there, which is touring at the moment, is called 500 Strong. It's 500 photographs of naked women over 50 from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes and abilities and gender, everything, every kind of variety you can imagine, taken individually, but put up together, because I don't think anybody would have been able to face doing that on their own, but as a group, they did. The message we were trying to get across was really about the positive aspects of aging in women and the strength that comes with aging.
Sounds amazing. I was going to ask you if it was touring. So it is touring, but is it that in Australia? Is there any plans to tour internationally?
I'm talking to some people in a couple of countries, and I think for that particular piece with the 500 women, it's really important to have representation from local women. So I'd be happy to speak to somebody about getting started up themselves, because I think people want to see women like them in those images.
Mm, mm. But it's very, very powerful. And I thought it was fascinating because I listened to a podcast when you were talking about it, and you talked about the fact that in Aboriginal culture, older women are seen in art. Is that right?
Yes, naked. They're seen naked, and
They're seen naked.
not with bodies, with their normal bodies, not with
Yeah.
anything that's been changed. I mean,
Mm.
normally you only see naked older women for shock, or for laughs, really.
Very powerful. And how did you persuade these women to take part?
Look, we advertised on Facebook, and they came running, really, and different
Really?
reasons. There was one woman who had been in an abusive relationship for a long time, and her partner hadn't allowed her to leave the house, and she was stuck in the house basically with her 3 children. And then
Oh my
eventually
goodness.
he killed himself in front of her and the children.
Oh my God.
And she did it because she could now leave the house and be herself in a way that she hadn't been able to for many years.
Wow. Whew. So for her, it was part of a healing journey, I'm guessing.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So it was very often when I could get away, I just went sat in the studio all day, just listening to the women coming in and talking about why they were there and watching them having their photographs taken.
Because I think you
Yeah,
interviewed them as well. Is that right?
we did. Yeah, we did some interviewing work that we published.
That's been published
Yeah.
as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd really like to see something like that tour internationally. I think that could be so powerful.
Well, I think particularly in the UK at the moment, with all of this, catastrophizing that's going on about
Yeah,
aging,
yeah.
it's a good time to have a different voice and present a different approach. Not that one's wrong, one's right. It's just uh, I don't think the narrative in the UK is really capturing the range of experiences that women have.
Mm. No, it's not. It's really not. And what's happening is that one woman's negative experience is being presented as the blueprint for everybody, and that's just wrong. I
Mm.
get very cross about
Yeah, no, definitely.
that. So what are your hopes for menopause narratives and for women getting older?
I think I'd like to see more realistic perceptions and presentations. I'd like us to move away from the idea that women's minds and bodies are controlled by their hormones. It's a historical thing that dates back to Victorian times, really, that women were permanently in some kind of hormonal imbalance and had to be either have their ovaries removed or given extra hormones in to balance them out. we're going backwards in this kind of view, because we are so much more than our hormones. So I'd like to hear a little bit more of that kind of narrative.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.